In this video, I'm going to show you how major and minor chord inversions work. I think of chords like buildings. Different buildings have different roles or functions within a city. Then you can think of a key like the city, and it can be easier to visualize how the chords interact with each other. I'll link a video at the end of this one if you want to dive deeper with this concept. Within each building is a series of rooms. Each room has a different function, and they are all critical to the overall running of that building. Think of these rooms like the individual notes that a chord is constructed with. Typically, each room will be on a particular floor or level of the building. For example, in a house, the bedrooms are usually found upstairs on the first floor. But if you walked into someone's house and the bedroom was on the ground floor, it wouldn't change the function of the room or the fact that it was still a house. It would just give the building a different feel. This concept can help us to think about chord inversions. Typically, the lowest note in a chord, also called the bass note, is the root note. The root note is the letter that the chord is named from. You might also see it represented with the number 1. For example, the C major chord is constructed with the notes C, E and G, with scale degrees 1, 3 and 5. So the root note is C. When the lowest note is the root note, then we say that the chord is in root position. Think of this like the default layout of a building. Everything is as you would expect to find it. The room you find on the ground floor as you enter the building is not surprising. If you change the order of these notes, playing a different one in the bass, then you invert the chord. Chord inversions change a chord's quality or feel without making it unrecognizable. They give you different ways to use chords without having to learn new chords. Like walking into a house with a bedroom on the ground floor, there's an initial element of surprise and intrigue. When dealing with triads, that is chords with 3 notes like C major, you have 2 possible inversions. Let's start by looking at major chord inversions. We saw with the C major chord example earlier that major triads are constructed with 3 scale degrees, 1, 3 and 5, and that if we play the 1 note in the bass, then the chord is in root position. A first inversion chord is when you play the 3 note in the bass. The other notes in the chord can be played in any order above this. The critical note is the lowest note. First inversion chords can be written a few ways. You might see them with a 6 and a 3 after the chord letter or Roman numeral. Sometimes this is shortened to just a 6, like you see on screen. You will also see inverted chords written with a slash after the chord letter, and then the note that's being played in the bass. These are called slash chords. To demonstrate the C major first inversion, I'm going to play the notes of the C major chord, C, E and G, on the piano. Then I'll use the bass guitar to play the lowest notes, moving from C in root position to E for the first inversion chord. First inversion major chords have a disrupted, slightly edgy sound. They feel like they want to move more than the root position version. Having the 3 in the bass can add some dissonance with surrounding notes, adding to the desire for this chord to resolve. If you know about major key chord progressions, then the most important chord is the 1 tonic chord. The video linked at the end of this one will detail this more for you. This chord is a major chord, and if you play it in the first inversion, it loses some of its authority. It feels less like home than the root position 1 chord. For example, look at this simple 1-4-5 progression in the key of C major. The first 4 bars are all in root position, but then on the second repeat I'll shift to a first inversion chord for the second bar of the 1 tonic chord. Listen to how the first inversion C major chord provides a lead into the F major 4 chord. This is because the bass note moves right up to E, half a step below F in the F major root position. Another popular way to use first inversion major chords is as the 5 chord in major key progressions. This puts the 7th note of the scale, called the leading tone, in the bass. The 5 chord's main function is to lead back to the 1 tonic chord. In this case, it's a bit like the last example. The changing bass note moves it right up next to the root note of the 1 tonic chord. This creates a smoother cadence, which you can hear in the next C major key example. One of the most common uses of the first inversion 5 chord is as a link to the 6 chord in major keys. In the following C major key progression, you can see that it helps to create a pleasing descending bass line, moving from C to B to A to G. This is one of the great abilities that chord inversions unlock for songwriters. This first inversion major 5 chord also features in minor keys, providing a bridge between flat 7 and 1 to again create a bass line that moves in half steps. Here's an example in the key of A minor. Let's move on now to major chord second inversion. Major chord second inversions place the 5 note in the bass. They are written with a 6 and 4 or as a slash chord. So with our C major chord example, the G note would be played as the lowest note. Second inversion major chords have a bigger, more stable sound compared to first inversions, whilst having a touch of dissonance compared to the root chord. Listen to all 3 versions of the C major chord in the next example. Remember that the order of notes above the bass do not matter. In major keys, you'll often see the 1 tonic chord played in second inversion. When played with the 5 dominant chord, this creates a pleasing cadence, as both chords now share a bass note. Listen to how smooth this sounds in the next example in the key of C major. In a similar approach, if you played a 4 chord in second inversion, then it shares a bass note with the 1 tonic chord. This creates a relaxing and soft feeling, which you can hear in the next C major key example. Just like major chords, minor chords can also be played as inversions. Minor chords are also triads with 3 notes: 1, flat or minor 3, and 5. As you might have guessed, if you play the 1 note in the bass, then the chord is in root position. If you play the flat or minor 3 note as the lowest, then we have a first inversion minor chord. These chords aren't widely used. Playing the flat or minor 3 in the bass makes the chord somewhat unstable. Here's how it sounds moving from A minor to A minor first inversion. Where you might see first inversion minor chords used is as the 2 chord in major keys. They work well in the common 2-5-1 progression. This changes the bass note to the same as the 4 chord, which brings an element of the popular cadence 4-5-1, smoothing out the progression. Listen to both versions in this C major key example. In minor keys, you sometimes see the first inversion minor chord used for the 4 chord. This creates a strong pairing with the borrowed major 5 chord to create a strong cadence to the 1 tonic chord. This introduces the same bass movement as a popular minor key progression: 1, flat 6, major 5, 1. Listen to the following example in the key of A minor to hear the subtle difference between the two. Now it's time to look at the minor chord in second inversion. This is where you play the 5 note in the bass. These are more popular than minor chord first inversions, and like major chord second inversions, add a bit of weight and depth to the chord. Listen to the difference with the A minor chord as we move from A minor to first inversion, then second inversion, and back to root position. Feel free to use minor chord second inversions as simple replacements for any minor chord in any key. But as you might be seeing with all of these inversions, they give us great options for playing with bass lines in our songs. On the extreme, listen to the static gloom that playing the second inversion 4 chord brings to this A minor key example, where every chord has the same bass note. On the other hand, with a mix of different inversions, these same chords can now feel like 4 distinct chords within a progression. You can use inversions like this to get more mileage out of your progressions. By writing a progression once, you then have 3 possible options for each chord, which gives you a huge amount of variation that you can use for later repeats of the progression or in other songs. All of this, and we've only been using basic major and minor triads. Let's put this all together with a C major key example. It starts with the C major 1 tonic chord in first inversion to provide some ambiguity to begin with. This also sets us up a half-step bass move up to the 4 chord F major. Then I use the 2 chord D minor in first inversion to maintain the F bass note, which then leads us onto the G major 5 chord. We're going to head back to the 1 chord C major in the next bar, creating a 2-5-1 section. To add some extra interest, I break up the 5 chord with a first inversion G major chord. This highlights the leading tone for a smooth cadence back to C major. It also sets up a rising bass line, B, C, D, E, F, which will run through the second half of the progression. In bar 6, I use the second inversion 4 chord to maintain the bass note. It also mirrors the first 2 bars using 1 and 4 chord, but the different inversions bring a completely different feel. The second inversion 5 chord continues our stepped bass, followed by second inversion A minor, then F major, creating a plagal cadence back to the 1 chord C major to end. Listen for all 3 versions of the 4 chord F major featuring throughout. By using inversions, it gives us so many more ways to use this chord without it sounding boring or repetitive. Chord inversions are a powerful songwriting tool, but if you don't know how chords function, then they are useless. I've created a unique system to understand major key chord functions, which you can learn in the video on screen. Watch that now to put your inverted chords to great use.